This is The Countdown, discussing tomorrow's news today, as our top guests tackle the issues that matter, with a sharp take on every story. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Weeks and Onyx Duncan.
A very good morning and welcome to The Countdown, our inaugural show for this Sunday morning. It is now 10:06 in the morning here in Georgetown, Guyana. We want to thank all of you who are viewing us from across the world and, of course, the Caribbean and locally here. My name is Andrew Weeks. And on your screen, you're seeing there my co-host,
Mr. Duncan, Onyx Duncan.
Onyx,
Hi, welcome everyone to The Countdown. I hope that this first edition of The Countdown is splendid, wonderful, and you're in tune with whatever is happening here in Guyana and in the regional community. Andrew.
Yes, Onyx, thank you very much for being here. So glad that you could join. You can join us, Mr. Duncan, with this first edition of The Countdown. We have a lot to unpack this morning. We have Mr. Nigel Hughes in the green room standing by.
Yes.
But first, Onyx, for the members of the press and those who are watching, the viewers across the world, we want to first to show you exactly what today's paper will hit you tomorrow. So, right now off the bat, we have the Guyana Chronicles telling you right there that your country needs you. Now more than ever. Really?
Is that true?
You think that is true?
Do we have the capacity?
Well, we'll soon find out, because a number of persons have been graduating across the country with degrees and master's degrees and all of that. But you see there the job market in the country, according to economists, those who do these kind of fine checks and tunes will tell you that the country having a brain drain. A lot of persons are leaving, and the president is saying that the country needs you. For what?
Yes.
For what? We'll soon find out. And if you see there as well, they're saying that safer experience for shoppers, vendors being created at the Lenore Market, invitation, transformation in agriculture sector in Berbice, firefighters save, fireside suites from total destruction.
Exactly. Right? Good work from the fire service.
Well, good. They get the equipment now. I see a lot of equipment coming in for them. And the kite show, you can go with that one, Onyx.
Yep. So, first and foremost, you have Jagdeo brushes off World Bank warning of oil glut lowering prices. And most importantly, if you look below that page there, Andrew, Vice President Jagdeo cannot say if Guyana will get improved fiscal benefits from 7th Oil Project until Exxon makes full submission. Then we have the swift action by the fire service saving fireside suites. And Guyana might receive taxes from Canadian mining company if gold price remains high, CEO. And then we have here Brutus. A lot of withdrawals. A lot of withdrawals. A lot of withdrawals from Brutus coming in. Breaking news there. Man electrocuted while repairing angle grinder. We have a lot to unpack today, Andrew.
And the VP Jagdeo cannot say if Guyana will get improved fiscal benefits from the 7th.
Well, we will learn. We'll get some information.
Yeah. We have data to unpack with Mr. Nigel Hughes to get his take on it.
Our first guest.
Right. And we're not done yet. We have the famous Times, the Ghana Times, saying that safer, more convenient shopping with new security package, extended hours at Lenore Market. Fire erupts at Fireside Suite Hotel. 21-year-old electrocuted at West Berbice home. Then we have here, I have a phoenix within me, and I will rise from the ashes.
Rise above.
Okay. All right. So That's what the Sunday Morning Times are telling us. We also have some headlines from the Starbrook market, from the Starbrook News rather. We have Mr. Patterson saying that second oil audit to be finalized today. Really? Okay. That's something, you know. We have also major woes at Albion Sugar Factory. Sources says that there's major woes at the Albion Sugar Factory. You know, that's a serious matter. Procurement Commission not doing its job, says Mr. Patterson. GRA in enforcement operation at Hunter Street Market. And that's what some of the headlines are saying in the Starbrook News this morning. I'm seeing that there. And so we have Village Voice also saying some other things there. GAU called for stronger worker protection amid concerns over oil and gas labor prices. If you go there, you will see it. Mark Phillips telling the Caribbean Ministerial Meeting region that the region must unite on climate resilience, ignores similar importance at home. Wow. 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 Just wow. So, that's what some of the headlines are saying this morning, Onyx. And so, you know, we want to let the viewers know tomorrow news will not meet you with a good taste in your mouth.
Nope.
Because it always come back. It always come back to give you a surprise. And now, let's get right onto it. Mr. Nigel Hughes is in the house. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the countdown.
Love in the background.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, Onyx. Allow me to start by congratulating you two young people on taking this very bold initiative to bring up a program that will be informative to the entire citizenry. I applaud your efforts, and we will certainly support your efforts. So, good work, guys. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks about the background. That's my backyard, so to speak, or front yard.
Nice. Andrew, we might have to go host our show in the background here, man. In the backyard.
The backyard cafe, boy. Oh, Lord. Mr. Hughes, thank you once again for taking the opportunity to join us. The invitation to join us on our program, our first show this morning. I'm so happy that you find the time. I know you're a very busy attorney. Lots to do. But, sir, we have a lot to unpack this morning. A lot to unpack this morning. And I want to get right into it. First question, off the bat. Now, recently, the leader of the opposition said that the two of you are going to be meeting, or you plan to meet. Could you confirm?
He's already engaged.
And
he's ready to meet them.
Yeah, if that was done, if you already had a meeting or you're about to have a meeting.
Well, first of all, let me say that this is three parties: the leader of the People's National Congress, the leader of the Working People's Alliance, and myself in my current capacity. We had a meeting with the opposition commissioners on the biometrics issue because the chief executive officer of GCOM had done a presentation, I think it was sometime last week. And at that engagement, we were debriefing with the opposition commissioners. We discussed and agreed that insofar as the issue of biometrics is concerned, that we should meet. We didn't have a broader commitment than that because what we're dealing with immediately at this point is biometrics. There's going to be another meeting on Tuesday of GCOM where I believe that the presentation by the chief executive officer is being discussed. And I believe Mr. Norton was referring to our arrangements to meet again, particularly in relation to biometrics, because it is a particularly...
So, Mr. Knight.
Sure.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying the biometrics is particularly important for the delivery of a free, fair, and credible election. So that's certainly what we're meeting on at the moment.
Okay, so the meeting was not about coalition talks, because that is what we are seeing coming out from the PNCR camp, from their conference.
I have not seen the PNCR's release, but what I will say at the moment, that's not on the immediate agenda. What we are meeting on is the biometric issue.
Okay. Great.
Nigel, I want to go back to that biometrics. I want to follow up on what my co-host was saying about the biometrics. Now, there's serious concern about that biometric thing, and I want to get your perspective on it. Now, biometrics, according to my understanding, biometrics can only say yes to those who registered, but it does not say who registered or if they are really Guyanese. Question is, how do you get to check and balance that to say that those persons who have registered are Guyanese? That's one. How are you going to fix that? The other thing, because they are, the government has already registered a lot of persons in terms of their policy, what they passed in the parliament recently about
who's Guyanese.
Right. For those of you, if you want to get an ID card or a birth certificate, you must go to what you would call them, persons in the community to show justice of the peace, and you can get an ID card. The question is, how is the opposition going to scrutinize that?
Okay, so I think you've asked me two questions. One of them is on biometrics. Now, biometrics has a couple of phases. First of all, at the point of registration, the fingerprints of the citizen who is being registered by GCOM, those fingerprints are captured and harvested at the time of registration. So on GCOM's files, you would have the information on the person, the biodata information, name, address, date of birth, etc. And they will also have what we popularly refer to as biometrics, would be the fingerprints of, I think it's either both hands or at least the 5 fingers of one hand. So that's at the point where they harvest the information collected. More important part of biometrics comes for the purposes of verification, and that comes on the day of election. So when you go to vote, previously you'd present your ID card or your passport, as the case may be. You'd be a Guyana ID card or passport, and therefore you were entitled to vote at the polling station where your name is listed. What biometrics does, and let me just say this: if the ID card, when you turn up with the ID card, you're relying on a visual examination of the person who presents the ID card. So if somebody looks close to me and they go to the polling station, and the returning officer says, yeah, that must be him, it relies entirely on a visual identification, which we know certainly from law is not particularly reliable. People make honest mistakes, and there are people who perhaps are not as honest as they ought to be. What biometrics does is, because GCOM would have already collected your fingerprints, when you go to vote, you present your identification card or you present your passport, and then your thumb print or your first fingerprint, your forefingerprint, whichever finger they intend to use, that you press that on some sort of instrument that receives it, and it will cross-reference that biometric, that fingerprint, with the one that is on file. So, for example, if I turn up and pretend to be, or I present a ID card that says that I am Andrew Weeks, and I present my thumbprint on the instrument, when that instrument picks up my thumbprint and looks at the master for Andrew Weeks, it will flag immediately and say that this is not Andrew Weeks, or this is not the fingerprint we have on file for Andrew Weeks. So in your series of questions, one of the questions was whether somebody turns up now and for some reason fingerprints is an issue. Everybody who is registered on the list, GCOM ought to have their fingerprints, because that is a requirement. When they're registering you, not just this registration, the registration before, they take your prints. So they actually have a data bank of fingerprints. So I can't turn up pretending to be Andrew Weeks or on X or somebody else. And it's a higher level of verification because it's a biometric. It's not relying on some human looking at you and looking at the card and saying, yes, this is so. Because quite often a lot of the photographs on those ID cards are not particularly clear. Some of them are fuzzy. And I know 90% of people don't think they truly represent what they look like. So there's an opportunity for a lot of potential misinterpretation and problems if you rely on the visual. That's one of the principal reasons why we have been calling for biometrics. And at the end of the day, what we really want is a credible, fair, and free election. And to be credible, I can't imagine why people would oppose any measure that adds to the credibility of the result by using objective factors like fingerprints. I think in one of the interviews, I heard Mr. Jagdeo speak about retina scans. That was some time ago. I'm not sure that we're in a position to do that in time for next year. So I think fingerprints are pretty good as a form of biometric identification.
Mr. Hughes, Onyx, you got a question you want to ask him?
Yeah, we would recall in the past the vice president speaking about biometrics, and now he is going back on that and saying that if we have a system now, why don't we continue with that system that works instead of going into a system that will hamper the process? What do you have to say about that, Mr. Hughes?
I think from all the expert reports that we have received, biometrics will not hamper the process, just as how a new registration will not hamper the process. I think GCOM already has fingerprints. It's only a question of acquiring the equipment to make sure that you place in every polling station that piece of equipment that will read the fingerprint of the voter. So this is not going to cause any delay or any undue delays, I believe. The fact that the vice president thought it was necessary over a decade ago, I don't think that we have implemented any system that has been as secure as biometrics to date. If we had retinal scans or something else, but we don't. He's probably changed his position, which all of us are entitled to do. But I certainly believe the highest level of verification of the identification of the voter cannot reasonably be opposed.
I want to go back on that same question of, biometrics and verification, because my concern about this whole aspect of the biometrics is not necessarily the process of registration in terms of identifying who voted. My problem is, even though the biometrics will tell you who voted in terms of the print and all of that, it does not say if the person who voted are legitimately Guyanese.
Chinese.
Oh well, you're going to another issue, and I think you're going to the issue of Venezuelans who apparently have been issued with Guyanese identification cards.
Right, right. But hear me out. So, can the biometrics tell you?
Biometrics. No, okay. All the biometrics will say is the person who has presented this identification card is the person
who voted,
who is present at the polling station. That's all it can say. Biometrics does not address any sort of fraudulent recording of people who are not Guyanese as Guyanese and issuing them with Guyana identification cards or Guyana passports, as the case may be.
But
biometrics cannot address that.
But how do you?
Not that it can't identify. It can't address it. It can't, in its present format, identify it.
And is that a good thing, Mr. Hughes? Do you think that you can trust that process in terms of saying that the biometric will tell you person who voted is Guyanese? No.
I don't think anybody who has been advocating for biometrics is saying that this is a foolproof system. What they are saying is this: insofar as you want verification that the person who is on the national register has turned up to vote and is not allowed to vote on multiple occasions, then biometrics addresses that issue. So whereas before there have been allegations that people have turned up and have voted more than once, presenting different identification cards on different occasions, biometrics will say if you voted at 6 a.m. and you turn up with a different identification card in the afternoon, the fingerprint will say, I'm very sorry, you voted before. So it addresses, amongst other issues, the question of the same person voting multiple occasions. What biometrics does not address, and which is the other major area of concern, is people who have been registered and issued Guyana identification cards who clearly not entitled to them, who will then present these cards to the polling station. And of course, the fact that they've been issued and registered means their prints will be in the system. So biometrics will just confirm that Pedro Venezuela is Pedro Venezuela. It will never tell you whether Pedro Venezuela is a Guyanese and was entitled to be registered and issued a Guyana identification card as a Guyanese. And I think, Andrew, you touched in the issue there, and there's a huge problem and difficulty with the process, and that's this. The law got amended to allow the two shows and community leaders to verify that if Andrew Weeks turned up at Baramita and Andrew Weeks said, I was born in Baramita, but my birth was never recorded, then the two show is then given the power to say, yes, I know this is Andrew Weeks. I remember he grew up in the village. And Andrew Weeks thereafter becomes entitled first to a Guyana birth certificate, because the Tushaw has now verified that Andrew Weeks was born or grew up in Baramita. And he gets that birth certificate, then becomes entitled to Guyana identification card. He can then register, prints are taken, and he can vote. Now, the problem with that is that if the Tushaw is less than honest, or if the Tushaw is less accurate in making representations or approving the persons who he said grew up in the area, then the system is open to complete abuse. And there's no system of verifying whether or not what the Tushaw says is accurate. So if you have a Tushaw who is less than faithful to his oath, and he says, 200 people, yes, grew up in this village, those 200 people, merely on his say-so, become entitled to a Guyana birth certificate, and then they become entitled to a Guyana identification card, and they then make their way to the list of electors and entitled to vote. Now, one of the problems we have, and we have several in Guyana in relation to this issue, is we have no official figures and no official information on the number of Venezuelans who are in Guyana to start with. So we don't know if it's 30,000, 60,000, 2,000, 3,000. So that's the first figure you would need. Then secondly, how many of them have applied for and potentially been granted Guyana identification cards? Because some of the Venezuelans who have come to Guyana are Guyanese who had left to go and live in various parts of Venezuela. So we certainly need information on what those numbers are, so we could begin to see what is going on in terms of the electoral register. Thirdly, there's absolutely no information on the census. It's already 2 years, heading to 3 years overdue. Now, all this information the public is entitled to this information. This is not private, confidential government information. All of us, each and every one of us is entitled to this information. And so when you have such a large body of data that is being either not disclosed or intentionally suppressed, then it leads to a lot of difficulties. And of course, after that, as if the information is not available, people start to speculate. And of course, in the process of speculation, it impacts the integrity and standing of the electoral process, which leads to problems afterwards. And these are very, very simple issues that can be resolved. Declare how many people do we officially know of Venezuelan origin are in Guyana? Bottom line, 20,000, 30,000, 90,000. We start with that figure. Secondly, how many of those people are Guyanese? How many of them hold Guyanese identification cards? That information certainly should be public. There's no state secret there. Thirdly, the census, in which people went around house to house to identify exactly how many people are in the country, what their income levels are, all the information that is necessary that constitutes a census, none of that is made available. And so again, it leads to speculation, and it also leads to reservations about the reason why this information is not being made available. We have not heard a credible reason why we can't get the census results. And we know that they finished this process a long time ago. So once people start to speculate and that speculation is reasonable, there's a loss of confidence that naturally follows that. And so yet again, Guyana is in a difficult position.
Well, Mr. Hughes, you've raised a ton of red flags right off
Yes.
the bat because what you're saying there, that no one should go into an election with all these red flags that you just put forward there, because you're done seeing the scale has already been leaning on one side, in terms of fact checking or putting the necessary legislation in place to ensure that the list is properly,
Clean.
clean, and more importantly, that the persons who are registering are truly
Guyanese.
Guyanese.
Yeah,
That's the most important one.
Are
That
you
is the
willing
most
to go into
important.
an election with those queries, those big questions? Should anyone go into the
Well,
election with
yeah.
those questions not answered?
That's always a difficult question. And I mean, we have a history in Guyana where I think it was the 2006 election. One of the major parties, the People's National Congress, was not going to participate in the election up to the last minute. When they changed, they said no verification, no election. The difficulty is that if you don't participate in the election, and I'm not necessarily saying this is the AFC's position at the moment, but if you don't participate in the election and they get a series of small or overnight parties who participate, the result gets announced and that remains the result. And then you're left with the burden of going to court to challenge it. And unless you intend to take very strong political action after an election, which clearly was premised on high degrees of fraud or high degrees of inaccuracy in terms of both the count of the vote and also the compilation of the list, then what happens is, the PPP says, well, we want 90% of the people who turned up. They go to Parliament with 90% of the vote. And Guyana is completely different to Barbados in the sense that you can have somebody who's got almost 100% of the vote, but they are far more responsible people. And nationally, I am embarrassed to say this, but it is a fact. I believe politicians in Barbados are a lot more responsible and nationalistic than they are in Guyana. So that is the risk. And if you leave any party in Guyana, whether as a result of a boycott or as a result of some other means by which you have not participated in the process, if you provide them with an opportunity to take all the votes that turn up simply because the credible opposition has not participated, they can then, vested with the power that is in excess of 2/3 majority, they can then go and change many things in the Constitution, including saying Andrew Weeks is not entitled to vote. So one has to be, I think, one has to think deeply about this when one comes to discuss the issue of boycotting, because unless you are going to take very strong political action, then you have a problem. And of course, the contrary is also equally difficult, as we've seen in Venezuela. You end up with a result where most of the people believe it does not reflect the outcome of the election, and you end up with huge protests. And either way, the country suffers, and that's really where we are, seem to be heading.
Are you willing to take
All
strong
right.
action, Mr.
When you say
Mr.
take
Hughes?
strong action, what do you mean?
Strong political action to ensure that you get a credible list for this election?
I am prepared to take all political action that is legal and that is permissible. And I believe that includes, and the strongest, sadly, the strongest form of political action in Guyana is actually appealing to our friends in the diplomatic community, because we know that there's absolutely no engagement between the political parties in Guyana. One political party does not find it necessary to engage, meaning the party in government does not find it necessary to engage. If you're talking about strong political action in terms of protests and marching down the streets, unlike the People's National Congress and unlike the People's Progressive Party, the Alliance for Change does not have mass unions that were there at the beginning or at their formation, and mass unions that are affiliated with them. So the capacity to put thousands of people in the street is not a strength that the AFC possesses. Now, that's only one form of political action. So if the analysis from the AFC's perspective is going to be completely different from the analysis by the People's Progressive Party or the analysis by the People's National Congress, because both of them have large unions that are associated with them, mass movements that are associated with them, and therefore they have an advantage in being able to mobilize people more effectively for that kind of political action. But I don't believe in this particular era that is the only political action that is possible.
All right.
Any question on that level, in that area?
Sorry? I mean, we unpacked so much on biometrics and the upcoming 2025 elections. I feel as though the time is against us and we have so much more to talk about. I don't know if you have any more questions on biometrics, Andrew, but I would like to move on.
Go ahead.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're moving on. Mr. Nigel,
yes.
You know, since he took over the role as leader of the AFC, the branding of the better must come and the hype on the grounding, it's really had a big effect on both parties, the PPP and the PNC. But there are some political pundits who are saying, you know, for you to really challenge the PPP, you need a Trumpian kind of a person. You know, that a Trump mantra to really take on the PPP. Do you think you have it within you to be a Trumpian to take on the PPP and to get action done as leader or a leader of the AFC? Do you think you have what is it within you to be a Trumpian to take on the PPP?
Well, first thing first. I think you've got some false assumptions there. So I want to address those first, okay. and then I'll come on to whether or not I have the capacity.
Okay, go ahead.
I think what is happening again, unfortunately, is the culture in the country, the political culture in the country has been so degraded that it has reached a stage where if you can buse out, to use a Guyanese colloquial term, if you could buse out the other side and call them low life and stupid and don't make no sense, and if you are abusive, you appear to be a strong politician. So the more abusive you are, for some reason in Ghana, it gets equated with political strength. And that's perhaps because that culture has dominated the country for so long. I'm not sure that people who like that or appreciate it, but I don't subscribe to the belief or the philosophy that because that appears to be the dominant political culture, that you go to the lowest possible level, you become as personally abusive as you want to, you insult anybody who challenges you, it doesn't matter whether they're political or otherwise, that means that for you to be effective politically, you have to behave in like manner. I think what has happened, unfortunately, to our culture is that people get distracted by that because it's entertainment. If I say that Andrew Weeks plants marijuana up the Berbice River, let me just pick something like that. That becomes a headline. Nobody fact checks in Guyana. And so for a week, we will be discussing whether or not Andrew Weeks is a drug pusher because some politician said so. And we don't go to the issue. So we have become so base in our political culture that we believe that, you know, to be a strong political leader means you must have a masterful ability to abuse out the other side. So that is not my approach. That is not the approach of the Alliance for Change. So let me make that very clear. So irrespective of whatever any political leader chooses to describe me as, whether low life or whatever, that's fine. He can do that or she can do that. I will not attempt to match that. Politics today, and I think we have discovered this over and over, people are no longer, driven by, fantastic individual personalities, etc. They're driven by the message. It is the message that is important. And what happens, and I think the American election perhaps has demonstrated this, the Democratic Party, based on what their advisors said, spent a lot of time attacking Mr. Trump and what they perceive to be his failings or his inadequacies. And Mr. Trump just kept repeating a very simple mantra. I mean, whatever your views are on his political philosophy, but he kept saying, look, one, the economy, and two, I'm going to make America great again. Forget what your views are on that. He said that, and that clearly resonated with the people, because the fact is that the average American was paying more in the supermarket for basic goods. And insofar as Trump was putting America on a nationalistic platform and saying, we got to look after home first, it appears to work. He not only won the presidency, he won the popular vote, and it appears as if he's won both houses. So I believe also in Guyana, people hear this abuse and abuse out every weekend. And I mean, if you look at the National Assembly, if you wanted to teach any class, any civic society class, any social studies class, of what you ought not to do, just play any sitting of the National Assembly. I mean, you have people raising dildos and talking about all kinds of awful things. But that's the level of our political culture. Now, people believe that if you don't respond in the same way, then you ain't a real politician. Well, I beg to differ. I have abiding faith in the intelligence of Guyanese people, and they are going to see through all this bluster. They are going to see through it. They're going to see through that you spent $1 billion a year last year from the National Resource Fund, and you don't have a single project to show. They are going to see the fact that this so-called wealth is not affecting the lives of the average citizen. They can't afford to pay for food in the market. Mm-hmm. They're going to see that. That doesn't have anything to do with whether you think Nigel Hughes is a fool or he's a lawyer or the vice president is the greatest thing since sliced bread. When you go to the market, can you buy food? Can you buy the basics? And people that's what it's going to come down to. It's also going to come down to who people believe will deliver the best future for this country. People are not silly. And coming in the fourth and a half term of your 5-year existence and giving me 100,000 or giving me 200,000, when you've had this money since you came into office, people are going to ask, well, what exactly were you doing? Is it just because it has become a hot political issue that you suddenly decided that you're going to give people 100,000? People are not silly. They're going to say, what's going on? And for a lot of this population, they observe who are the people that are doing well, who are the people that are driving the fancy cars, building the huge mansions. They see it, they know it. And they, like the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, they can say, well, go buy, how come I can't drive a fancy car? How come I can't build a mansion? How come just like everybody else, we all graduated from University of Guyana at the same time, and some seem to suddenly rocket to extraordinary economic success and others struggle. People see that. And it's going to be the party or parties that offer the real change and the path to change. You can't just jump up and say, oh, we give you this because it wasn't there before. It couldn't have been given before because we didn't have this kind of money. People will understand and they will examine the pathways to the future. Women and children. We are very strong on women and children. When we release our vision for the future, we are going to show you what are the institutional arrangements that we have planned for that specific cohort. Mm-hmm. Women need access to finance, economic support and advice, so that we can build an entire set of the part of this community that will have businesses that will sustain this country, that are not all dependent on oil and gas. And all of that is going to come out. So those things are going to come out. I don't want to give too much away about what we're going to be releasing. I know some people are saying that we're without a plan and program. The first thing that I said when I was privileged enough to be elected as leader of as head of the Alliance for Change was, we need 15-year plans and 20-year plans for some key areas. The response from one party is, oh, you're asking to borrow our plans because you have none. That's not the point. The point, of course, we have our own plans. The point is, if you want to have a country in which all part people feel that they count and that their views count and that they can participate, you have to have a system that involves them, and the system must have long-term plans. You can't run a country on ad hoc decisions. Today we can decide we're building a bridge over the River, and then tomorrow we decide, oh, we're not paying tolls for that bridge or any other bridge that we're going to build over any other major river. That is a completely reckless and irresponsible way of running a country. So answer your final question is whether or not I think I have the ability to address that. Two things. One, sure, I could address these people who are abusive and want to run, cuss out every weekend. I mean, everybody could deal with it. That's not easy. Every guy needs to know how to cuss. My office in Cross Street, I got daily lessons growing up there. But that is not where the future is. The future is, and it's going to be very clear at the next election, do you want the leadership that spends 80% of its time cussing down everybody, not just the political opposition, but everybody? The press conference last Thursday, Mr. Ram got cursed down. Mr. Gulsaram has never been in politics. He gets cursed down. The editor of Starbrick News gets abused. Do you want a country where that is your political norm? Or do you want a country in which all views are received, all views are discussed, we set up the state apparatus so that we gather the data that will inform all of us about the decisions we take going forward? One of the proposals that we haven't released yet, we need professional MPs. You can't have a multi-billion US dollar budget and don't have a professional member of parliament who must have paid research assistants. Every member of parliament must have paid research assistants, and this is the reason why you need this. How are people seriously going to debate billions of US dollars in income and allocation and investment, and you're doing politics part-time as a member of the National Assembly? How are you seriously going to do that? And you have no research assistant dedicated to you. What is the level of discussion that is going to take place about real issues about the future of the country? Not whether or not somebody needs a dildo or whether or not somebody has some allegation of some personal challenge. Where are you in those committees that they don't even bring together? The parliamentary subcommittees on natural resources. When you come to discuss natural resources, how are you doing that without serious research and information on the decisions that you are going to be called on to make? And so we can have this level of money and not have high-level discussions on matters that are important to the future of this country. So I believe full-time MPs and paid research assistants for the MPs. Otherwise, you really are just going to have a shouting match with a rhetorical debate in the National Assembly.
Onyx?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Yeah, I would like to follow up, not directly on this topic, but we've seen over the past few weeks, the Vice President, Jagdeo, has been calling for the AFC to apologize. I know that you've been out of politics for some time during that coalition period, and he's been calling. And we know you missed the AFC press conference last Friday there.
Yes,
we want to hear from you. What do you think the AFC needs to apologize for? What do you think the Vice President is asking the AFC to apologize for? And how should the AFC go about doing that if there's a necessity for them to apologize?
Okay, so the first thing I would start off in response to that is, you may recall that at my acceptance speech as leader of the Alliance for Change, I said that the Alliance for Change is going to be conducting a review of its performance in office and at the 2020 elections. That means the Alliance for Change is going to conduct a detailed analysis of what it did in office, what the lessons of what it did or didn't do in office are, and similarly its role in the 2020 election. When you ask me whether or not we're going to apologize for the role in the 2020 election, this is long before I ask you what you're specifically talking about. You tell me the Russians. But when you ask me that question, you're asking me to prejudge what the Alliance for Change is going to find in its investigation into what it did before. I can't prejudge. Apology is premised on the fact that there is a fault. I'm not saying that we will not find faults, but when we have completed that process of reviewing what it is we did and didn't do during the period in office, and similarly, what it is we did and didn't do during the 2020 elections, then we can have a discussion on that. We've already had a former minister of the Alliance for Change say that he thinks that the Alliance for Change should apologize. Now, that will be taken into account whenever we are doing the review. It should be pretty shortly. And if he's willing to come and make a presentation on why he is of that opinion, all of that information will be received. And at the end of that process, we will have a very clear idea of our steps, missteps, and steps that were favorable. But you cannot, at this point, want me to give a blanket apology about the 2020 election. So, I wasn't here yesterday for the press conference because I had a personal bereavement and I had to attend that funeral. But I did ask for specifics. I can't come to you and say, "Oh, next, will you apologize for your childhood?" And then you're going to say, "What part of my childhood are you talking about? Is it the school I went to? Is it?" So don't let's get distracted. And the final point I want to make about that is this. Don't let's get selective in our morality in Ghana. Don't let's get selective. Has anybody apologized for Mr. Crummy Wing? Has anybody apologized for Johansi Douglas? Have we yet received any apology for the slaughter of Orrin Boston? Has anybody apologized for those 1,200 African males that disappeared and we still don't have a commission of inquiry? Has anybody apologized for Ronald Waddle's killers still not being brought? Has anybody apologized for the cell phone tracking equipment that came into this country that Roger Khan and now Ambassador Ramsamy, was Minister Ramsamy, brought into the country? Has anybody apologized for many things in our past? So when you somehow seem to select the Alliance for Change, the Alliance for Change has never been accused of killing a single Guyanese citizen. Never. We have never had a single minister, party official, nobody in the Alliance for Change has ever been associated with the killing of a citizen of this country. And you somehow want to say, because we have asked what it is we must apologize for, given the history of events that some of which I've just articulated, that nobody has been ever called on to apologize. It's a bit of a, selected morality. And so when Mr. Boston's family gets an apology, when Mr. Crummy Wing's family gets an apology, when we start to get real prosecutions, we have paper shorts being shot down just outside the president's residence. Nobody's charged. No apology for the Commissioner of Police for their failure to act or failure to investigate. The two young men that got murdered up in West Coast, Babis, the Henry brothers,
Henry boys,
for their death. So when you come and say to the Alliance for Change, which has never been associated with any murder, any political assassination, any form of violence, whether by inference or directly, you want an apology for them, and you have not had the courage to ask the people who have been involved in those deaths that I've just mentioned, and in those circumstances, sounds a little selective to me. But we don't shy away from it. We will address it. And as I said before, we are going to have our examination. So this is not a question of being slick and smart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, for that comment. If you're just joining us, you're looking at the inaugural program, the countdown. We have as our guest Mr. Nigel Hughes. He has unpacked a lot of things. If you just missed it, a lot of things just now in the last 25 to 30 minutes. It is now 10 minutes to the hour. We've been so far already in the show. I can't believe time has gone past that fast. But Nigel, I want to come to this thing concerning the $1,000 cash grant. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know if persons remember, but I've done a little research and gathered some information that there is a Poor Relief Act of 1933, okay, that governs public assistance. Mm-hmm. And the government has not been paying attention to that. But Jagdeo is trying to sidetrack that law with a bill for this $1,000 one-off cash grant.
Are you saying that Mr. Jagdeo is proposing legislation for the 100,000?
No, but I'm saying he just he wants a bill, but not a law.
No,
Not a law.
the bill is read first, and then after it's approved, it becomes a law. So, but I'm not sure that is he suggesting that there is legislation? Because I do recall him saying recently that he did not believe there was a need for legislation.
But Mr. Hughes, I mean, the vice president stated there always have to be some kind of caveat to a proposal, something under the table, between the lines that persons may not be reading when it comes to this cash grant. You've been fighting for that. You have pushed the VP to come up with a bill because you say, no, there's going to be a bill, there's going to be a bill, there's going to be a bill. How confident are you that the PPP will honor that law when it comes into fruition?
Well, Andrew, you would have to help me here because I have not heard the vice president say that he believes that there should be legislation to govern the awarding of cash grants or direct transfers to the citizens. What I heard him say is that if you pass a law, it will become too bureaucratic, it will push up cost, and therefore he didn't believe that there should be a law. That's the last thing I heard. I mean, I was out of town, and it's very possible he might have said something else. But my understanding is he first of all misunderstands the Alliance for Change position, and I don't know if I can take an opportunity to say what the Alliance for Change position is on cash grants. We say that, look, you can't legislate to transfer a specific amount at any particular period to the citizenry, because the ability to transfer funds depends on the economic health of the country, the economy. So our proposal is this. We believe in cash grants. We believe in direct transfers, but it must be done responsible. We have to be fiscally responsible. So our proposal is that we put together a panel of economists. Everybody can identify an economist, the government, the opposition, civil society, and the academia. And they, first of all, come up and say, the country at any particular point in time, having looked at its fiscal performance over the last year or how many quarters, is in a position to make a disposition of X billion dollars to the citizenry. And therefore, we say that that is available, and then a decision can be taken in relation to the amounts. Second thing we say about these cash grants is a lot of it has to be done on an incentive basis for areas of national development. And I will pick the easiest one, which is the Bolsa Familia that they have in Brazil. We want to make sure that all of our children are fed and are not subject to extreme food poverty. Right now, the international agencies, the UNICEF and World Health, say that 20% of our kids are in extreme food poverty and 40% are in food poverty. So that needs to be a priority of any government, I would have thought. And therefore, we need to be able, when we're doing cash grants, to address that issue. So that has everything to do from providing meals to all school children throughout the country and putting in place an incentive system so that the parents of children, or the mothers in the case of single parents, they have to perform. They have, for example, to make sure that kid attends school regularly. So at the end of the period, we look at what their attendance is and what they get ticked for that. We have to look at their academic performance. They get points for that. We also have to look at their health development. We weigh them. So the young infants and what have you, we weigh them. And based on that, there's a special type of cash grant that goes to that. And you can build that out across the economy in different sectors. And that's what we're saying. You need a responsible, mature approach. It as much as we support a direct transfer now, it has to be done fiscally responsible. So you cannot mandate, first of all, that it will be every year, because if oil prices drop to $10 a barrel, and we simply don't have the money to be able to pay a specific amount of money every year or every month, then you can't seriously say that you're going to pass a law that says you must pay even when you can't afford to pay. So it has to be fiscally responsible, and that is our approach.
To follow up with that same cash grant situation, Mr. Hughes, the app that the government is proposing to be done.
The application.
There is no legislation for that. Do you see that as another ploy?
Sure. The government wants to get an app. They're going to get your personal information and data, and then the government is going to bombard you with political information for the elections next year. They're going to do it
through the app.
Yeah, of course, through the app. So they're going to do it under the guise that this is government information, but really it's political propaganda. And that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to harvest the information rather than paying the people who would actually have, who could get it for them. And secondly, they're using their position as government to acquire people's personal information and then use that information for political purposes to their advantage. I can't hear you, I'm afraid.
No, I was saying, Onyx, you want to follow up with that cash grant? Do you think that app, as Mr. Nigel Hughes said, that app is propaganda?
It's not only propaganda, but
the app is propaganda. The app will give them the information. As for example, you have a Facebook page.
Yes.
They harvest all your information. That data is not owned by you. That data is owned by Facebook. That's why the ads that you see and the ads that Onyx sees are not the same ads, because they know that if Andrew goes to look at broadcast equipment and Onyx is going to look at entertainment, the ads that will turn up, the reality that the two of you will get will never be the same. One will be biased towards broadcast and the other will be biased towards entertainment. So once they harvest that data, they have your personal data, and then they can use it and manipulate it to do what they want.
Do you see legal challenge coming there for that app when going into?
Okay, again,
in the terms of national security.
Yeah, but it's going to be difficult in Ghana because we are such a rudimentary country. We don't have any protection of information. We don't have any law that protects personal data in that sense. We don't have robust laws, that, particularly constitutional laws, that give you a right to the protection of your personal information. And so challenging that, or the prospects of success, challenging that at this point in time, I don't think will be as promising as somebody else might think if we had a more robust constitution that provided protection.
Tough.
I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just saying to you, those basic protected fundamental rights don't include that. Now, we have a lot of treaties that are directly incorporated into our constitution, but the principal organ for enforcing those rights, which is the Human Rights Commission, which should have been set up since 2003, up to now has never been set up. So even under our constitution, the primary institution for enforcing infringement of your rights, your treaty rights, the Human Rights Commission, after the passage of 20 plus years has never been established. We don't ask anybody to apologize for that, but that's a fact of life.
Onyx, do you have a question on Exxon?
Yes. I noted recently that the vice president, most of my questions today are directed to you about the vice president, Jagdeo, because he's been very loquacious at every press conference. He stated that the government cannot say if they will get improved fiscal benefits from the 7th oil project. Why? Because they'll need to wait on Exxon to provide that information. Do you think that Guyana, the government of Guyana, needs to wait until Exxon provide that information, or can they do that from an assessment that they have already done in the past?
Okay, so you know that if I even mention the word Exxon, there's going to be a slew of conflict of interest. You're representing your client. Any view that you express on this will be used against you because Exxon is.
But we also know that you don't directly represent Exxon.
No, I know. I know all the information. I know all the information in Exxon, but I have taken a position within the party and publicly that I will not comment on anything to do with Exxon, simply because my firm, and even though it's my partner who deals with them exclusively, represents them, and therefore it's a conflict. And we have identified a panel of 3 eminent people to head our oil and gas positions. There is Dr. Vince Adams, there's Mr. David Patterson and Professor Shamir, and those are the persons. And as much as I am chomping at the bits to respond to your question, having taken that position, I think it would be prudent of me not to take the bait, however wrapped and packaged.
Thank you so much, Nigel. But just to follow up, I know that you will not answer that question, but we are looking at recent times, and it's coming back again, the rampant corruption that is happening within the Guyana police force. And so far the currently the Guyana prison service, where they've unearthed about 40 million missing. How is it that the PPP 20 years ago involved in corruption and are still with their corrupted minds and attitude and are still doing it barefaced?
Well, I think corruption in Guyana has been elevated to a human right. It's almost everybody believes they have a right to be corrupt. And therefore, if they're in a position, if they're in a job where they have to issue licenses, arrest people, they're going to make money off of it. Having said that, the reality is corruption has been pervasive for a very long time, and now it's at outrageous levels. You, the citizens, you, Mr. Onyx, you, Mr. Andrew Weeks, and all the voters, you have to decide whether or not you want this country to continue along this corrupt path or not. There's nothing new about it. Everybody knows what's going on. You can see the corruption. You can see the people who have overnight become wealthy. You can see people winning contracts and getting $600 million above the engineer's estimate. You see people who have no qualifications for building various infrastructure projects getting $800 and $900 million contracts. I don't think there's any issue about corruption in Guyana. It's a given. As a matter of fact, people almost believe that they have a right to be corrupt. The question is, the citizens have to decide if that's what you want. Because corruption, you lose twice. You lose first when the contract is allocated and you got to go and pay 20, 30, even up to 40% as bribe money to whoever awarded you the contract. And then the result is that you get a much 30, 40, 50 minimum lower quality product because the contractor ain't gonna run at a loss. So the citizens again end up with poor quality roads, poor quality pumps, poor quality almost every service. And at some stage, the citizenry have to decide enough is enough. They have to decide. I don't think of course it's important to expose corruption. Of course you're finding people with $800 and $900 in their bank account when they should be dealing with law enforcement issues. But the citizenry have to make a decision. Is this the kind of country I'd like to live in?
Oh, tough one.
All of a sudden it's a little difficult, is it, Andrew? Oh. You have to make the decision. It's not the boss.
Yeah, you got to make the decision. Mr. Hughes, I want to turn attention to the Leader of the Opposition office. Now, there is the Leader of the Opposition office is a constitutional body. Yet, we have the Office of the First Lady, which is not a constitutional body or office, getting more money
funded
than the Office of Funding than the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. Do you think it is necessary that a challenge should be made to force the government to honor the funding or get better funding to the Leader of the Opposition by way of a budget? Let's say, I kind of ask and answer question, but I'm going to give it to you anyhow. Let's say.
So I don't need to respond then.
No, well, it's going to come. I'm going to give you a scenario.
No, if you're answering, I don't need to respond. I'm listening to you.
The question is going to come anyhow. It's going to come. Hold it. Let's say there's a scenario that the opposition parties come together and put forward a budget. Go to the finance ministers here, ask for a meeting. This is the budget of the Leader of the Opposition. And the Minister of Finance said no. Can't happen. Do you think there's some legal challenges there to force the government to honor a constitutional body, its budget, rightfully theirs, to get the funding that they need because they have staff, they have people to pay, research persons to pay, and so on and so forth. But yet still the government is determining to the opposition leader's office what money that they should be given
Money.
when the
Yeah.
constitution is clear that the office of the leader of the opposition must get a budget that reflects the work of the office of the leader of the opposition. Your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, first of all, if we are serious about governance in Guyana, we must understand that to get good governance, you got to pay for it. This is basic in life. You pay for the quality of service that you get. And if you want good governance, you need an opposition that is properly funded. You don't want an opposition that is running around every 2 minutes trying to put together money to pay staff, because they don't have money, they won't have time to do the kind of research that would lead to the level of discussion and discourse about the major issues of the day. So that's the first thing on that. Two, you live in a country that is ethnically divided, completely divided, really, really bad. I mean, I can't recall it being worse in my lifetime, and I'm not young. And there is absolutely no consultation, engagement, anything of the sort with the opposition. The government doesn't even say, hey guys, we're thinking of, doing something new. No consultation. The votes for the government come from one side of the ethnic divide. The votes from the opposition tend to come from another side, and the difference between them is what, 1%, 2%. So if in that ethnically diverse and divided society, there is no communication, no engagement by the person who happens to be in power, who only got there in 50 point whatever percent, then I don't see how you can expect anything looking like good governance or even the leader of the opposition going to the Minister of Finance. It may or may not be received. I don't know. The culture in Guyana is what it is. So I don't even know if the leader of the opposition would be received by the Minister of Finance. But given the conduct of the government over the last 5 years, I'm not sure that the opposition has any realistic
stake in the budget.
Whether they have a realistic stake in the budget, first of all, and secondly, whether they have any realistic expectation that the Minister of Finance, one, will entertain them, and two, will actually listen to what they say. Now, there is no, as far as I'm aware, and I will start off by saying I am probably not as familiar as I ought to be. There is no law, as far as I know, that relates specifically states the level of funding that the office of the opposition should get. I think the office of the opposition should be elevated, just as how the judiciary is an independent statutory body. The office of the opposition ought to be elevated to similar status with a direct charge on the consolidated fund to run it. You are asking a opposition leader in a multi-billion US dollar economy to have little or no resources, or to raise those resources on his or her own, when the way the government operates is that it cancels contract if you even look as if you're talking to the opposition. So you can't be serious about governing a country, you can't be serious about governance if that is the environment in which you operate and continue to perpetuate. Now, whether they have a legal right to, say, increase funds, I don't know. I don't think there's an office of the First Lady. I don't know how much of the funds that are allocated to the First Lady are presented during the budget and are line items in the budget to say, but yes, $800 million allocated to the First Lady for some project in health or whatever. Subject to seeing that, I would not want to venture. But as far as I know, there's no office of the First Lady. Whether so you're bringing litigation on something that doesn't exist, and you'd have to look at the budget to see if there were allocations for specific purposes.
And we'll get back to you on that, but it's a big concern. It's also the concern that the office of the leader of the opposition should be a constitutional building, because you have opposition leaders jumping from building to building. Jack Deere was on Church Street.
Yeah. That's precisely what I mean. You can't be serious about governance if you're not funding the person who's going to interrogate what you're doing in government. You can't be serious. And in an economy like Guyana, where ethnically divided, economically divided, the opposition supporters don't have the economic wherewithal as the government supporters. They don't benefit from the friends and family. So how is this even going to be funded on a voluntary basis? It sure, if we're serious about a new country, that will have to change.
Onyx?
Quickly, Nigel. The question when it comes to office and leader of the opposition, I know we're not speaking about coalition, but I would like to understand that there's several calls from not only the leader of the opposition to meet with the AFC, but there are calls from the wider society, Guyanese, and there are also calls from other political parties to form a coalition.
Mhm.
What what effect does that have on the AFC at this time? Question one. And how do you go about bringing in several other parties, not only the PNC, but the other small parties into the AFC realm at this point in your life as a political party?
Well, let me start off by saying the Alliance for Change is willing to meet with every single person. We've said so for years. I repeated this when I was elected. I said that we will meet with political parties. We will meet with civil society. We'll meet with the Private Sector Commission. Just let me mention again, in relation to the Private Sector Commission, we've written to them. They have not responded. They called me up after it was mentioned in the press conference, and we've not heard anything about them. That in and of itself is a statement. We plan to meet with the unions, including GAU, including the TUC. We plan to meet with the churches. We plan to meet with the Hindus, the religious associations, Hindu, Muslim, Christian. And so we are committed to meeting with everybody. We have already started to engage some political parties. And so we are not against meeting and talking about what is in the best interest of Guyana. That is always our mantra. What is in the best interest of Guyana? Sure, there have been a lot of calls, and I receive messages every single day that the only way we are going to be able to defeat the People's Progressive Party is if we go into a coalition. But I also receive every single day messages from people who say that we ought not to go together because, of course, the experience we had in the last time. And everybody's got a legitimate position. My position and the party's position has been from July to now and remains the same. The Alliance for Change as a political force was very strong up to 2011 and even up to going into the elections in 2015. They were part of the government in 2015. But it was a member of the Alliance for Change who brought that government down. Charan Das voted with the opposition and brought the government down. The actions of Charan Das have caused significant damage to the Alliance for Change. I'm not going to pretend that it has not. It has caused significant damage. There are other actions that I think have had a negative effect on the Alliance for Change. And therefore, as leader, I think it is my responsibility to attempt to bring the party back to a position of some standing and strength in which it can at least look and embark on discussions with all political parties from not a position of impairment or weakness, but from a position of us standing on our own 2 feet and the strength we have. You know that we just had a minister who said that we should apologize. So clearly, the difficulties of the Alliance for Change are not ceasing. We have said we will examine what it is that we did right and what we did wrong, both during our time in office and at the 2020 election. When we have completed that examination, we will have information on how it is we intend to go forward, and we will come up with what are our key areas for the development of the country and the interests of the party. That's why we have started on a listening and grounding tour, because we have to hear from you, the citizens, exactly what you think of the Alliance for Change now. When we have finished that process, and it will not be long before it is completed, when we have finished that process, we will have an accurate assessment of where the Alliance for Change is and what the Alliance for Change can offer to the future of this country. And once we are clear about that, we are also going to be clear about whether a coalition, whether we run independently, whether we run in some other form of arrangement, political arrangement, whether we have joinders. All of those things we have to address as a responsible party, not now.
Oh.
I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but I tell you where we are.
Oh, thank you, sir. I got two more questions. Then we're going to close off for my point. Mr. Hughes, there's big talk now
You sounded
about
like you had a body blow just now.
it is big talks now about the faith and trust in the Caribbean Court of Justice. We have election coming up. There'll be a lot of challenges going there, and a lot of citizens feel that this country does not, quote unquote, have too much faith in the CCJ.
Mm-hmm.
There's call for Guyana to withdraw itself from the CCJ. I mean, as a legal luminous, do you think that's a wise decision for the Ghana to withdraw from the CCJ now, or do you think we should stay and lobby for more changes within the CCJ? What are your thoughts?
Let me say you're probably the second public person that has asked this question. I was a little surprised when I got it the first time, and I think it was from Kadaki. I didn't personally realize that the level of confidence in the Caribbean Court of Justice had dropped that significantly. I have to confess, I didn't. Maybe because I'm a practitioner, I'm too close to practicing in the CCJ that I missed it. So let me start off by saying that. But the first question I would have for you is, what is the reason for the loss of confidence? Is it that there have been a series of decisions that have gone against a particular party? Is it that the quality of decisions that are coming out of the CCJ are now not where they ought to be? Is it that there is a perception that the CCJ has a less than has an approach which perhaps does not lend itself to confidence in the population? Let me start off by saying all of the things that I've heard recently, if I were the CCJ, I'd be very concerned about it. And certainly from a public relations point of view, I would begin to address it, because you can't have serious numbers of stakeholders in any one of your constituent countries having reservations about a court. I think that is not a good place to be. Now, I am cautious before I respond, because the fact that you have lost, let's say, 5 murder cases in a stretch doesn't mean the court doesn't like you. It could be you just had 5 bad clients, or you had 5 bad cases. So I wouldn't say, and I'm assuming it's before the same judge, I wouldn't say, oh, that judge is biased simply because I had 5 convictions. I need a little bit more information. Now, if the summing up to the court appears to be biased, is not consistent with the law, then you have a basis to start attacking the court. I am always very, very reluctant to attack any court, because at the end of the day, I think the judiciary is the most important of the 3 arms of the state, because they're the people we go to if we have difficulties with the other 2. And if for some reason we lose confidence in our judiciary, we head into serious lawlessness. Now, like I said, I know that there have been decisions, there have been a string of decisions which appear to have gone one way. I don't know if that is the reason for the lack of confidence. If it's the quality of the decisions, normally in a regulated society that is progressive, you would have academia who would be writing articles on the quality of the decisions. I myself have reservations for some positions that the Caribbean Court of Justice has taken that appears to have reversed positions they took before. But those reservations are not sufficient for me to call for the court to be removed. And they're nowhere near that. I just think, we have a difference of academic assessment. Now, what I will say is Guyana for a very long time did not have a 3rd level court. We had the High Court, we had the Court of Appeal, and that was it. And there were a lot of allegations. Not that I thought that a lot of them bore merit, but there were a lot of allegations about lack of confidence in the Court of Appeal. At one stage, I think people spoke about the party flag flying outside of the Court of Appeal. Having said that, some of the best jurists that the Caribbean has ever seen came out of that era. Joe F. Haynes, George, you go through them, Stobie, Crane, all of them came, Luckoo, came in the same era that people had reservations about. So we need a third court, but we need to be very careful about what we do about it. Now, like I said, if you say to me that it is the quality of the decision making that is causing problems, I would want to have an examination of those decisions. Academia in the Caribbean is there specifically for that purpose. The law faculties, the professors, they're the persons who should be critiquing decisions and saying this is an anomalous or unexplained decision. I haven't seen a lot of that work going on. Maybe a lot of that work is not going on. But I'm cautious in responding to that. And I'm not sure at the moment I have enough information upon which I would begin to even do that. These are people who have given their entire lives to the practice of law. They have gotten to the pinnacle not by accident or political favor. I think they strive to be as fair as they can be. There will always be missteps, I suppose. But I am not sure that we want to elevate that now to wanting to leave the court, particularly where the suggestion may be that we just don't like the decisions that have come. So
just to follow up.
Sure.
Just to follow up there, Nigel, right there. Do you think that the continued loss of confidence with the CCJ, that there will be serious ramifications?
I don't know that there's a loss of confidence in the CCJ. I'm hearing that for the first time from you and Andrew. No, I heard it from Kadaki.
It's been happening since 2018, or right. Even before that.
Right. But, okay. But here's the difficulty with that. And I'm not trying to stop your question. I don't want you to come with a question that's built on an assumption that I don't accept. Political cases have winners and have losers.
Losers.
Okay. Therefore, we accept in any political case, somebody will win and somebody will lose. The fact that you lose in the absence of some other justifiable reason is not a basis to hurl accusations at the court. Now, I'm not saying that the court may not have done the things that you're accusing it of, but I don't want to attack people of that integrity merely because in political cases, one side has not prevailed. We have to, you see, the Caribbean is very, very, we are small people. We are very fragile. Our institutions are very, very fragile. It's not as if we have 100 years of independence and we have gone through several permutations and combinations of running our own affairs. And we've had some difficulties managing our own affairs. So in your question, I don't want it to be premised on the fact that there has been a lack of confidence. I have noted, and it's very strong, Kadaki said it, and you are saying it again, that significant parts of the population are losing confidence in the Caribbean Court of Justice. And I think that is something that they ought to take note of and for them to address. But I can't personally say that I am of that view.
Let me restructure the question then. If, hypothetically speaking, or once the people of the Caribbean loses confidence in the Caribbean Court of Justice, what would be some of those serious ramifications that we'll be looking at? And looking ahead, you have to wonder, would the CCJ address these, or would the CCJ answer these questions or unanswered questions and put these problems or issues to rest, or allow it to grow?
The first thing I will say, it would be a collective embarrassment if the CCJ failed in the Caribbean. No, I'm serious, because the CCJ is the embodiment of one of the pillars of our independence as a people. We had the Privy Council, and the Privy Council used to determine everything. And we said that as a people, the last area of our true independence was that we can establish a court of our own, of our best and brightest, who will sit in the Caribbean and deliver jurisprudence of the highest quality for our people as independent people. If the CCJ fails, and I pray to God that never happens, it will be an admission by all the people in the Caribbean, all of us, that we are incapable of adjudicating on our own issues at the highest level. And it is almost as if we are saying colonialism as a venture was successful insofar as the Privy Council and the legal system is concerned. I don't want to see the Caribbean go there. Really don't want to see the Caribbean go there. I feel it is my responsibility as a lawyer and as a practitioner, now that I've heard this for the second time and expressed quite strongly, that somehow or the other that I can indicate to the court through the local channels that there clearly is a crisis of confidence and that they address it, because I think the institution in its own interest ought to be able to address this. This may simply be a question of strong public relations, but to go to the stage where you are saying that this is a failed venture is a hell of an admission of failure as us as a Caribbean people. That we cannot even have a judicial institution, one of the pillars of a civilized society, fail. That's almost like saying, look, let's reverse 1966, May the 26th, and go back into colonialism. Yeah. That is the implication of that. And I'm sorry, I don't even want to begin to contemplate going anywhere like that. If there are problems in the system, as there clearly must be, because I've heard you very strongly, Andrew's very strong, I heard Kadaki, that there clearly is a substantial number of people in the country that are questioning the integrity of the court. I think the court needs to take serious note of that. Now, the problem with that is that you create another problem. If you create that pressure, then the court in difficult political matters may feel either I don't want to deal with it at all, or to appear to look balanced, I got to go a decision in another direction, which the law may not necessarily support. I would encourage that we have a lot more academic criticism, perhaps, or examination. No, let me say criticism. Academic examination of the work of the CCJ as a body. We have robust institutions in the Caribbean, the law faculties, the University of the West Indies. We have the local law faculty. We have law schools throughout the Caribbean. And we have external academics who can make this an area of interest. And let's get the benefit of that work, even if we treat it as urgent. But I am very, very concerned, and I'm really disturbed that that from what you say that there is a significant level of lack of confidence in the Caribbean Court of Justice.
Well, maybe Mr. Hughes as well. You may also need to ask the government to reconsider that the appointment or the substantive appointment of the Chief Justice and the Chancellor of the Judiciary, which have not met a proper conclusion on the government side to accept these two bodies, these two leaders, these two lawyers are substantive in their position, because the opposition leader said that he has a problem, he doesn't know a problem with it, but the government still not sure, or maybe do not care to appoint these two bodies to their substantive position. Is that not another lapse in terms of getting proper justice or review?
You're talking about two different things here. We were talking about the CC.
On the part of the government?
Well, two different things here. First, we were talking about the Caribbean Court of Justice.
I'm talking about our High Court now.
But what I'm saying is the appointment and non-appointment of the Chancellor and the Chief Justice is not an issue. Well, the CCJ has already made its position very clear. I think the President of the Court has repeatedly said that it is a scar on the judicial landscape of Guyana that we have not substantively appointed Chancellor and Chief Justice. So I think the CCJ's position is clear on that. I think also at our national level, it's an embarrassment that we have not confirmed the appointments of these two persons, and that as a country we don't appear to have the means, because this is not a new problem. It was there since I think Carl Singh was sitting as acting chancellor. That we don't have the means or the capacity as a people collectively to be able to resolve this problem. That's a hell of a place to be. Because if you as a country with all the citizens cannot resolve who becomes the chancellor and the chief justice, they don't get extra votes in the court. The chancellor doesn't get 2 votes in the court if you got a 3-panel court or a 5-panel court. So it's not as if you're vesting the chancellor with the power to vote twice in any particular decision, or the chief justice. I mean, at the end of the day, the panel sits and the panel decides, and it goes on the numbers. So I'm not sure why we are here, but again, it's another testament as a people that we are unable to address major issues that confront us, and that's a national I almost say it's our national culture. It appears to be.
Mr. Hughes, your profession as a lawyer as well has been well known across this country. I mean,
you mean the profession, not me. You mean the profession is
the profession? Yeah, your profession. But there's still this question. I mean, there's still this question that is nagging behind a lot of Guyanese mind. Why have you not been given the position or the, senior counselors yet? All these years of being a lawyer, have not been given.
Let me answer that.
Yes,
this is a historic issue. When my father was practicing law, he was a very distinguished and successful lawyer and had distinguished himself in the area of law, but he was denied senior counsel under the presidency of Mr. Burnham. And after Mr. Burnham died and Mr. Hoyt became the president, he got senior counsel. So there's always been an element, so far as the family is concerned, of some level of political involvement. I was invited early 2001 at some stage to submit an application for senior counsel, which I did. I think, I can't remember who was Chancellor, whether it was Carl Singh or it was Justice Bernard.
Ian Chan?
No, long before that. I'm just giving you the chronology of what happened. I at the time I was invited, I did submit an application to be.
Maybe the late Bernard.
It was either Bernard or early Carl Singh. I can't remember. Then at a political rally, I think he must have been President Jack Dio at the time, got up and said that so long as he is president or has any influence over the president, that I would never be senior counsel. And I dare say neither the bar or the judiciary, not because of Nigel Hughes, but because of what he said, got up and said that that was unacceptable. Because I don't see how the head of the political arm of the state can decide who should and should not be rewarded with status that says that within your profession, whatever your political views, you're worthy. And after that statement, and after the absence of any statement by the judiciary and the Bar Association, I wrote to the Chancellor and said, I do not wish to be considered for the position of silk. And that is early, must have been 2005, 6, somewhere around there. And my position has not changed. I do not wish to be conferred with the status of silk in Guyana, now or at any time in the future.
You said in Guyana?
In Guyana, yeah. I don't wish in this country to be considered for the award of the status of senior counsel. I hope that puts an end to it. I just don't wish it. Whatever I have done or haven't done is on the record.
So he doesn't wish to be.
No, I don't.
Onyx, you're an upcoming attorney. You have any question on that front from Mr. Hughes before we go?
No, I do believe that as a learned member has said that if you have achieved something and your achievement is well out there, and you don't need nothing as status to put before your name. You don't need a status of silk or senior counsel to put before your name. Your record speaks for itself, and if Nigel says he doesn't want to be attain the name or status of silk, well, we should agree with him. And that's in Guyana. So I would believe that you still would like to attain the status of senior counsel, some parts of the region, in the Caribbean.
I really don't practice in many parts of the Caribbean at the level I ought to. I may before you, Onyx and Andrew, decided to burden me with this position of leadership of the Alliance for Change, I was heading to retirement in St. Lucia. This has postponed those plans a little bit, but certainly that's where I would like to be.
Yeah. But I would like to urge, Andrew, this time, any young and upcoming politician to take note from our senior council,
The People's Senior Council.
the People's Senior Council.
Mr. Hughes, my final question to you before we head out of here is on education. One of your babies of education. I heard you.
My number one baby, my friend.
One of
Number one.
I would say it's
Number
my
one.
firstborn.
Yes. Sir, you have seen a lot of persons graduating recently from UG in education, and you heard the president said that we need you. We need all of you to be a part of education. I mean, do you think that statement is a genuine one? Because we are seeing otherwise. The level of education, the level of mathematics, the level in that area, in other subjects, and the brain drain of our educational bodies in this country are leaving this country. Remind us as one about that, your thoughts on that, and the last one before you go. The New Republic that you're talking about. Everybody is wanting to know what this New Republic is all about.
Sure.
Your
I
thoughts.
don't think you have enough time for the second question, but I'll touch on some key elements
Summarize,
of the New
yes.
Republic. But let me come back to the statement the president made. It's a fact. It's axiomatic. Ghana needs its young, bright people. That's a fact. They needed them from before independence. Back in from the time Ghana has known itself, whether it's British Ghana, it has always needed its young people. People will tell you in the 40s and 50s, people started to migrate because they only had opportunities up to the end of secondary school. You had one scholarship, and therefore a lot of people who clearly had ability migrated. A lot of that changed during the 60s, 70s. People went away on scholarships. The reality is that whichever era you pick, especially post-independence, most of our young people in large numbers prefer to migrate. They prefer to migrate. Now, that's a hell of a statement on all politicians because it means that they don't see a future in Guyana for themselves. And if they don't see a future for Guyana in themselves, they leave. And we have been bleeding and hemorrhaging at the rate of 80 and 85%. The fact is, Guyana does not offer them the kind of life that they would like to live or see, either security, health, education for their children, economic success. They don't see it here. And that to me is the number one problem. If we do not create an environment in which our young people who are qualified, not so young people, feel that they can live in the country of their birth, that's a major problem. And that's what we should be fixing. So it's easy to get up at a graduation ceremony and say the obvious. Every country needs its young people. But to need your young people, you have to give the young people what they're looking for. You have to create the environment in which they want to stay. You can't give them house lots and houses that are astronomically expensive and their salaries are not comparative or capable of carrying it. You can't ask them to live in a society where we live like cats and dogs and we're fighting every day and we're abusing out. And if you're not with this side, you got to be with that side. And if you're with the other side, you can't get a contract. Your business can't grow unless you endorse a political candidate. You can't build a society like that. You just can't. And that is what pervades the country now. So it's a lot more than saying the obvious, which is that your country needs you. It is what are we doing? And more importantly, what is the political class doing to create an environment of fairness, an environment in which people genuinely believe they have an equal opportunity to participate in the future of this country and build, whether they're businesses or get jobs that give them their fair share, and they don't see the bulk of the money going to a very, very small set of chosen friends and family. So you're not going to, all you're going to have in this country, like the two of you, take Onyx. where unless Onex got parents that got land, or he got some rich grandfather, uncle, friend, something, how he is taking his brilliant idea. Even take this program. How are you let's say you're very popular. And people said, if I see you advertising in that program, buddy, all your contracts gone.
You're
Some
done
of the
with it.
popular programs in this country, if you look at Sherry Duncan's program, horrendously popular. Sometimes he used to have 20,000 viewers. Now, if you were a real businessman and you got an audience every night with 18,000 people, he should have a rush of
For
the
ads.
big companies
Yes.
hustling to advertise on his program. But it doesn't happen because each of them know that if they only put a single ad, Jack Dio is going to be after them. Look at poor Mr. Lal. Mr. Lal at Kaichur News, he's decided he's entering politics. And all of a sudden, Kaichur News, which has been a publication for decades, becomes a political rag. And so we can't talk about young people wanting to live in Guyana when that is the political environment. Can't happen. It is not going to happen. The second anybody gets a decent opportunity, even if it is in the Caribbean, they will pack their bags and go because they don't even have the certainty. They see what happens in this country. They understand what happens here. And they just don't see themselves being able to survive unless they want to become, unless they got to go bow down and kiss the ring of whoever the political leader is. And so that's the challenge in terms of a new republic. And I know we're out of time. Every iteration of Guyana since independence has not enjoyed a support of the broad cross-section of the country. Even our name, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, there are significant segments of this country that object to the use of the word cooperative or have a negative view of cooperative. Every era, whether we were talking about self-sufficiency with food, clothe, and house ourselves, whether we were talking about other development, whether we were talking about new human order, everything has always been politically partisan. We have always admitted from independence that we are ethnically divided, and we were ethnically divided long before independence. And one of the ways in which we can begin to address what is an obvious fact, whether we like it or not, our division, is that we need to put in place structures, national aspirations in a Republican environment. And when I say Republican, I mean in a republic. We cannot have a monarch. And effectively right now we have a monarch because you have one person that says a project can happen, it can happen, and the rest of the kingdom follows that. We need to build a true and new republic in which, first of all, its political systems result in the identification of a government that is representative of at least 60% of the population. That way, in our divided selves, we are forced by nature of wanting to attain political office to meet the demands of several sectors of the community and not just our own. So like Suriname, the president should be identified by 60% of the National Assembly. But more importantly than that, the national goals, the national aspirations, lofty as they are, one people, one nation, one destiny, have to have as part of it economic equality. Not just one people, one nation, one destiny, but some of our people in poverty and some are not. So the economic aspect of our aspirations as a country have to reflect the fact that all of its people not only can aspire, but are provided with fair, protected opportunities for economic equality, or at least at the minimum, equal opportunity. The new republic must, in terms of the protection of women and children, provide special circumstances and institutions that will allow them to come from positions of disadvantage where they are now to positions of parity So the women, from an economic point of view, must be funded and have access to funding that will allow them to control as much of the economy as their male counterparts. And it's not just by providing a level playing field. We have to acknowledge their historic disadvantages and provide them with the support. And that applies across the board to every disadvantaged group. So the youth, if the youth are genuinely going to be able to participate in the future of this country, they must be given the tools, the economic resources, and the removal of those obstacles that will allow somebody who may come from humble circumstances, but is particularly talented, to have the same ability to build and develop his business as somebody who has rich parents. He or she must not be at a disadvantage, and the state must provide that support responsibly. There are many other things that I can go on. The financial institutions to support women. And I know that the party's going to kill me for releasing this now. But one of our proposals is that we want to establish a bank for women. A bank for women. That is one of the measures that we plan to take. And it will be coming out in our manifesto. Because the only way you can redress these awful imbalances is being able to provide the institutional support now that we have the revenues. I'll stop there only because the New Republic is a much larger concept. But
breaking news. Breaking news there for us on it. Breaking news, my brother. Yes. Mr. Hughes, thank you. I don't know if Mr. On anything to add to it, but Mr. Hughes, you've been
Thank you so much, Nigel. I know we'll have you back. We'll have you back, but not soon.
Allow me to repeat my congratulations to both of you, young people taking the initiative, taking the risk. I fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you so much. Nigel Hughes there, our first guest on it. Oh boy,
yeah.
We have a lot.
We had so much more to unpack, but we couldn't do it in such a short time.
yes, I realized that. But viewers, thank you for staying the course with us this morning. It is 11:52, and we are well ahead with our plan for our next show.
Yes.
We want to bring to you quality programs so that you could get the information and the newsmakers can make their news, because I know a lot of members of the press will be here to make their news. We'll get a lot of story out of this same program this morning.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
This morning. And so to let you know that we have a lot to bring to you, we're going to share with you our next guest. There it is. On our next Sunday show, we're going to have two great ladies. Amanda Walter, the Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Zurita Fernandez, our AFC point person on economics, going to be joining us. And then the last week in the month of November, Rickford Burke, the president of the Ghana Caribbean Institute for Democracy, will be our guest coming up on the 24th of November. So we have a lot to unpack. I never got into the next month yet.
And we already have guests for the next month.
Almost done. So viewers, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to make a lot of news. And trust me, you're going to get a lot of information in terms of what's happening in our country. And so we want to thank all of you for being a part of the show. Onyx, I don't know if you have any question, any last minute thought you want to share.
Just follow us. Share the live on the Alliance for Change Facebook page and stay in tune with what we have here on the countdown.
Yeah, we also on the APNU AFC page. We also going to be on Politics 101 page as well. It's going to be covering the program. And our YouTube and Facebook. Right now we're on YouTube and Facebook, and so you're going to get the program right there as well. So thank you all for joining us, and we're going to see you right back here next Sunday at 10 o'clock for another program of The Countdown. Goodbye and have a great weekend, everybody. Goodbye.